Thanks so much for that intro, Jess. So we're just inviting folks in the room. If you're at a table with one or two folks, if you can join another table, it'd be great if we had tables with 4 or 5. Welcome to those who are joining online. We've got about 8 or 9 online folks. So if online folks are comfortable, we'd love to screen share just to say hello to them. Not all of them have been online for 2 days, but we've all been online a number of times in the last 3 years for conferences, and we know that watching a screen and participating in a virtual way really is draining. So we just want to do a shout out to the folks online. Thank you for joining us. And this will be a very interactive session. So we've budgeted from now till 3 o'clock. So in the room, we'll be talking in small groups at your tables, and we'll be joining tables and moving about the space. Online, we'll be welcoming you to jump into breakout rooms and working with your colleagues in a virtual way. So just a few quick things. While we're having this final plenary session, we invite you to share the floor with your colleagues. Some of you have been on the journey with this group for many years, and I'm going to even talk about times before the 5-year and before the 2015 Pan Ams that some of the roots of this work has started. So if you're one of those folks that's been around for a decade or so, we'd love you to jump in. If you're newer to the table and this might be your first time you're meeting a lot of these folks, we'd love to hear from you as well. All of these voices have an important perspective that will enrich our understanding. So please do make sure, and we heard Grandmother Kim talk about this, please share your voice and please make space for others to jump in. Be mindful of time. So I know we're starting a few minutes late. We've got a very hard stop at 3:15, but I want to make sure we've got time for the closing. So I will be giving you some tight time frames. If it is ridiculously unreasonable, I'll try to push back. If you need a couple more minutes, let's try to do that and make the time work. Same online, folks. I appreciate that you need a minute or two to get into a virtual breakout room and come back. So I'll try to be as reasonable as my unreasonable self can be, given the time constraints. And lastly, we'll ask that you record your input. So online shortly, you'll be receiving a link to a Jamboard that you'll be capturing your input. In the room here, we'll be asking you to make some notes on your papers, and then we'll be building onto the flip charts that are on the wall. So we'll be using a number of different materials. So a few quick things. We've seen a number of logo slides, but I wanted to go back even further than we've gone before because it's important to acknowledge that the work started long before the Trillium Grant, long before 2015. So this slide goes back to 2013. Laura Meisner was the facilitator in this session, brought together this initial group of sport legacy partners to begin the conversation of what could a collective look like. That work continued. This is a couple years later. You can see there's more logos here and more organizations. I could have 8 or 10 more slides talking about key meetings with logos of individuals and leaders, and a number of you in the room have been around those tables. That work laid the brick by brick foundation that we're able to build on today. We've heard Darda in our opening yesterday talk about 2.0, and now we're looking at building 3.0. But I just want to acknowledge the work that went into 1.0 that started way back almost a decade ago, and probably we could even date back some of the work before that. So I wanted to acknowledge the next gathering of this community is scheduled for Wednesday, February 21st. Not sure whether it will be exclusively virtual or hybrid with in-person in Toronto, but we do want to acknowledge there'll be another gathering in this community, and shout out to Parasport Ontario, who's taken the leadership to host that next gathering, and we'll be pulling some of these ideas together and further discussing it at that time. Okay. Let's talk about yesterday's closing plenary. Just quick indication if you were in the room, and online, I'd love to see a reaction from you. You can give me a thumbs up or give me a wave if you heard Brad Beatty's presentation on collaboration. So anyone in the room that was here, number of folks, and online, just looking for some kind of acknowledgement, either a thumbs up or a wave. So a number of folks heard Brad's hour-long expert description of collaboration. He walked us through 10 different best practices or utilizing tools that we already have. So I just took a few quotes from that hour, and these were things that really resonated, and I'll just invite you to consider these. They're on the flip chart outside the room for those that are here. One is innovate from experience. So we've got the 5 years of OPC, the years that led up to that, and now looking beyond, we're innovating based on the work that we've already done together. So this isn't starting from scratch. We have the expertise that we're building on. He also used the language, imagine if. So in your discussions this afternoon, I'm going to invite you to use that language. Imagine if, remember we did this at certain phases in our iteration? Imagine if we could do it differently. So that's language I'm inviting you to consider at your tables today, either your online tables or your in-room table. He talked about, he used a sport metaphor in a number of clever ways in his presentation yesterday and talked about approaching 3.0 as a new season. So we know there's changes in seasons. The schedule may have changed. We know we've got new people possibly on the bench. We've got new players on the field or in the pools, but we're building based on that experience. But it is new and fresh, and there's opportunities to do some things differently. It was great hearing John talk about his experience and building on the knowledge that he had, that Frog endowed him with as he went through his journey. So that's an opportunity we have as well. He talked about being motivated to re-engage, and another piece was collaborating for social impact, being bigger as a collective than we could as any individual. So just a few things that I wanted to highlight before we move forward. Okay, this is one of the questions that I'll be asking you. So in about 3 minutes time, I'm going to be asking all of you to consider this, looking at what 3.0 could be. So if we build on the OPC 2.0 and the 1.0 that preceded that, what's possible by 2026? So imagine that we're gathering and that we've got some keynote addresses and we're talking about, this is what we've done in Pathway 1. This is what we've done in education. What would those key highlights be? So that's the framing question. You'll see this slide in a couple minutes. So online, we'll come back to this, and you'll also be able to see this online, people, on your Jamboard. So just to talk about how we'll have this conversation, I won't take a lot of time here. Darda did an excellent job setting it up yesterday. We're inviting you to work within the pillars that have been used throughout the last iteration of the OPC. So entryway, it's Pathway 1, Pathway 2, next gen and high performance, leadership and education. So that question about what's possible in 3 years, we'll invite you to answer it for each of these 4 areas. So just to recall, and we built this from Darda's slides, so just a shout out to her and framing so well yesterday. So pathways, this was the language that was shared. I'll read it out here. To promote effective entry and quality participation through asset mapping, first involvement and transitioning, and align and integrate the parasport pathway for Ontarians. So when you're thinking about Pathway 1 and Pathway 2, this is just a slight description of what you might be talking about at your table, knowing that this was the intent. What's possible in 3.0? What would you like to see achieved in a 3-year time frame? Let's look at leadership. So again, the intent of this pillar as formulated was to develop the current and future capacity of sport leaders, including coaches, officials, classifiers, and administrators who lead parasport in Ontario. So again, with that understanding of what the leadership pillar was conceived to do, we're asking you what's possible in 3 years' time. Education, to increase child and youth participation in parasport and awareness of opportunities through leveraging partnerships with the education sector in all levels. Again, what's possible in the next 3 years? Building on the strengths, asking the what if, innovating based on our experience, what's possible. So I'm going to ask you at your tables, and if you're in the room, I'll invite you, if you're at a table that just has 2 folks at it, maybe you can join some others. If you're online, we're going to put you into a breakout room momentarily, and we've got a person that's going to lead you through that conversation online. So in room, you might choose to just jot some notes down, and we're looking for just one idea for each of these 4 pillars. What do you think is possible by 2026? Okay, so online folks, we're going to get you to work on a Jamboard. We'll turn off the feed momentarily. Oh, sorry. So we're just going to stay on this. Again, this is the beginning of me not giving you enough time for any of the activities I'm asking you to do. How about 8 minutes? The requirement isn't that you get to all 4 of these. Maybe you know 1 or 2 as a table. You can just stay with the 1 or 2. Stay with the ones that you know. Don't feel you have to get to all 4. So online folks, we're going to cut the feed from the main room and we'll get you into a breakout room, and you'll have a conversation with the group about what's possible in the next 3 years' time. In room, are clear what I'm asking you to do? Okay, so I'll set the clock for 8 minutes. Online, we'll cut the main feed and let you go to it as well. Yeah. Go. About 3 more minutes left here. 3 more minutes to get to as many of those pillars as you can. Go tell them. LAV. Huh? Just about ready. Take those out. Just not yet on my cue, but be ready. Couple more minutes here at your small table, couple more minutes. Last minute here, just finish up the idea you're working on, last minute. Okay, so I'm going to interrupt there for in-room folks. Online people will keep their conversation going, so we're going to extend the breakout room. So thanks to Christine, who's facilitating that in MA. So in-room, we're going to build on the same conversation that you've been having. We're going to go to frame 8 on the Jamboard, so you'll be able to see what the presenter is showing us. Great. We've got slides are being uploaded momentarily. So we'll get you to introduce yourself and give us highlights. And shortly, it will be on the screen as well. Please.
All right. So I'm Ray Dempster. I'm the manager of the Sport and Recreation Unit with the Ministry of Tourism, Culture, and Sport. So I was also the last person standing because I was writing. And so I guess I'm presenting to you folks. So the idea here was like multi-sport, multi-organization, fun try-it days for all ages, for people of all abilities, with community connections. I think the idea folks wanted to get across as well is that there is not just, the singular day, but that you make it easy for folks to make those community connections when they go away from the day. With respect to the who, there's a list of folks here, like in short, everyone. I think the notion was that, all PSOs, DSOs, LSOs, Parasport Ontario, anyone that you can bring to the table really could be participating. And the notion was that maybe you could do this like on an annual or semi-annual basis with summer, winter sports. And there was notion of doing it maybe across the province or regionally. But those were kind of the ideas from the group.
Super, thank you. Great. Let's go to pathway 2, and I think Gwen was also the last person standing over here, so. Great, and we'll just click the Jamboard ahead, the next frame, so people can see what you're speaking to. Go ahead.
It's very similar to Pathways 1. The who, it's going to be all the OPC existing members, all the stakeholders that we now have. We want to hang on to all of them. And if there are more parasports that want to join us, great, because there's still some that are not represented among us. The what is a commitment to the momentum, to keep it going, keep things going forward. We don't want it to come to a stop. We would like to see when a meeting in February is what we'd really like to see, because, you know, we can't do anything through Christmas. Winter sports are starting up. So February is probably as early as we can hope to possibly regroup. The next what is a gap analysis, continuing the work that we've done and clarifying of the alignment between a P1 and P2. We've talked about that separation from the grassroots where you learn to do a sport, and then the training to get to high performance is missing in some sports.
Great, thanks very much, Gwen, and your colleagues that were at pathway 2. We'll head over to leadership. Okay, thank you, great.
Hi. Can everyone hear me?
Thanks, Janet.
I was voluntold by my group, so thank you for that. With leadership, we discussed me carrying on with some of the work that I've been doing in classification. So generally all things classification on an ongoing basis. We also spoke about the need to have PSOs or provincial sport orgs endorse one standardized disability awareness training program. So for example, coaching athletes with a disability. So that would be the Coaching Association of Ontario and PSOs respectively. And we figured a kind of a 2-year-ish timeline, kind of a year recommending that they implement the need for this training, and then a year to have all coaches and volunteers get certified. We also spoke about the need for additional funds. This is obviously an ongoing issue across the board in sport. So we discussed potentially the OPC Leadership Committee putting a call out for interested individuals who might want to sit on like a sponsorship fundraising style committee to seek support to continue to host events like this and fund some of the work that we've done over the past few years now that funding is dwindling. And then finally, we address the need for a volunteer hub. So there are some very challenging barriers to overcome in terms of access to information and privacy with respect to sharing volunteers' emails and such. But we spoke about creating one sort of hub or utilizing a central organization to push out advertisements for upcoming sport events and recruit volunteers on an ongoing basis.
Super, thanks so much. We'll just head to the back.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erica. I am a teacher in the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board in Mississauga. So with education, it obviously made sense that I will be presenting to you today in terms of our future direction. So where we are headed. Just to kind of give everybody context, we're looking for purposeful and meaningful curriculum or program development. So coming from the education sector, our curriculum is our documents that guides our lessons every day, our success criteria, as well as the students' ultimate, completion of a course or completion of a grade. In terms of sport programming, the same thing applies to a lot of the agencies that are represented here today. We'd like to increase community partnerships as well as the visibility in schools. And that can be complex for agencies and organizations such as yourself trying to get into school boards. If you've been successful, congratulations. If you're still jumping through hoops and trying to get through that red tape, please don't give up, because teachers on the other end are also going through the same thing. And lastly, our ministry involvement. Now, I know we weren't going to kind of single anybody out, but today I think it's quite relevant to have our ministries, both of education and of sport, tourism, and recreation, to be involved in developing curricula and those programming resources to ensure consistency across all sectors. So what does that look like? we would like a meeting. We want a meeting with the ministry. We said the Ministry of Education because we feel that that is what's lacking. This is the gap that we're seeing in a lot of the pathway and grassroots organizations. So we're seeing the sports being involved, but we're not seeing a lot of what's happening in schools, where there is a disconnect between what you as champions of your organizations want to see and what's happening in our phys ed classes or recreational settings. We would like to create a universal hub. So we called it the hub of hubs. So Parasport is obviously trying to do that right now, but in terms of ensuring that all municipalities and all regions have access and have updated their information correctly to ensure consistency and also ensure that the language that is used, as we learned in our presentation this morning or earlier today, that it has to be consistent, right? We're not using adaptive physical activity or inclusion to mean different things for different regions and municipalities. And lastly, from an education perspective, our professional development days needs to have more integration with the organizations that you represent, ministry involved initiatives as well. So what that might look like is workshops. So from my perspective, we often do not have choice as educators in terms of what we're learning on our PD days. It would be great to have the opportunity to maybe have a session, whether it means that OFIA comes in or we have support from our post-secondary instructors and professors, especially at the teacher faculty departments or individuals in the teacher ed programs that can help and inform our educators or review with educators everything that they learned in teacher ed, especially including the IEP, so the individual education plan. The when is not quite set in stone. It might be ambitious to say a 2024 date. So we'd like to give ourselves a little bit of a year gap to try to figure this out. But the sooner, obviously, the better. And so that's it. Thanks.
Super, Erica. Thank you very much. And Christina, just to put you on the spot for a minute. Okay, so I know the online folks did have a conversation. We'll be preparing a summary report from the last 75 minutes, transcribing the ideas here, and the ideas generated by the online folks will be included in that report for everyone to see. So just a shout out to Christina who facilitated that, and I appreciate there were some issues with speakers and mics, so thanks for doing that. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this segment. Our next gathering, just to bring this back up, so if we can toggle back to the slides. So Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. Again, there's still an opportunity to decide whether it will be all virtual or hybrid, with the in-person being in the GTA. So just show of hands if that date or that gathering is of interest to you. So hands up if it's of interest. So a really high percentage of folks in the room are indicating, and we appreciate there were a number of people that weren't able to be here for this final session. So looks like there's a lot of interest in moving ahead. Again, shout out to Parasport Ontario for that. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to our closing speakers. Thanks very much, everybody.